Welcome to the Panthers Den, Bacalles Athletic Podcast. Meet our athletes, coaches, learn about our athletic programs, and hear what it's like to bring hard work and teamwork to the field. Now welcome Athletic Director Mr. Loveless to bring us the grit and glory and insight to high school athletics.
Welcome everyone to Season 2 of the Panther Den. We have a special guest, our new building principal, Mr. Bacalles. Mr. Bacalles, welcome to our podcast and to Campbell Savona. So as you step into this new role here with us, what is your vision for building a strong, positive school culture?
Thanks a lot for having me here, Mr. Loveless. I've always been a strong believer that the school belongs to the kids. And I really think to establish a positive culture, we want to have, staff, families, as well as students recognize that everything that we are doing is for them to have a great experience here at Campbell Savona Junior Senior High School. And we all want to offer as many opportunities as we can for students to succeed in areas that they're really passionate about, whether that's academics, extracurriculars, or interscholastic athletics. So I'm hoping that we can get, the staff, the students, as well as the community really dialed in on finding ways to support students, to go into the areas they're passionate about and really support them as they get achievements in each of those areas.
Super, thank you. So those that don't know our listeners, Mr. Bacalles is coming to us, by the way, at Corning School District. And just like in Corning, here as well, athletics is a big part of our identity. How do you see athletics fitting into the broader mission, your broader mission for the school?
Yeah, I've been fortunate to really be involved in athletics throughout my teaching career. I spent 13 years as a high school football and boys lacrosse coach. Even got into modified track in the last few years that I was in the classroom. And when I look at athletics, I think it is inherent in American identity and culture to be competitive. And what I love about athletics is it's an opportunity for our school to compete against neighboring areas to really show the differences about what it is to be a Panther versus some of our rivals in the greater area. I once heard, you're from upstate New York. When the town right across the way from you that's exactly like you cannot stand because of interscholastic rivalries. I grew up with that in Corning. So, I'm really looking forward to the opportunity for our kids to compete against neighboring districts to show the difference between, the Panther pride and what's going on in other places.
Definitely, that's my observation too. Upstate New York is that competitiveness. They're big enemies during season, but they'll go to each other's graduation parties, hang out, out of season, but don't talk to me in season.
Well, and I think a lot of that too, kids play competitive travel sports together. They know their neighboring districts' athletics, and it's kind of cool to see that rivalry along with that, friendship as well.
So as our principal, you'll be working closely with our athletic department and of course our student athletes. What does a great partnership between a principal and athletic director look like to you?
Yeah, I'm really excited about the role I'll get to play in athletics here at Campbell Savona, which isn't always the case in a lot of districts where the AD sort of takes care of athletics and the building principal doesn't really have a hand in things that's going on. So, I think my biggest goal is to find ways for us to try to tie the community into our athletics with our youth sports programs, to the high school teams, to increase involvement. I think that's the battle everyone's fighting is numbers are dropping across the board. So what can we do to partner with our local youth sports to get them connected to the high school, which has facilities and resources that a lot of them like to take advantage of, and then how we can build that close culture for each of the individual sports with the youth sports program so that we can get kids interested in sports when they're young and then help them develop as athletes and eventually put on the Panther uniform and compete here at the high school level.
Great. So all of our youth coaches, youth sport board members, hopefully you heard that from Mr. Bacalles. Be on the ready. We'll be reaching out to you. So how can we as the athletic department, so that's myself, Mr. Daly, of course, all of our coaches, our community, how can we best support your vision?
Yeah, it's funny. I've had the opportunity to coach, from the youth sports level to the varsity level. And to you youth sports coaches out there, let me tell you, the hardest job I have ever had is being a youth girls lacrosse coach. I think when you're teaching kids how to play sports at the younger levels and you're a volunteer coach, you're really struggling to fit in the time. It's basically, I guess the comparison would be, trying to teach 25 kids at the same time how to ride a bicycle, versus at the high school level where you're training them for the Tour de France, which is a little bit easier because they've got more task maturity and more maturity. So youth sports definitely, is a big challenge. So anything we can do to support the youth sports programs here, in consultation with our athletic department and our high school coaches, I would really like to see that move forward, because I know as a youth sports coach, I rely heavily on our high school coaches for help, assistance, getting kids to help ref games, as well as to provide clinics for our young athletes. And there is nothing better than seeing those youth sports athletes participating with the high school kids who they just look up to like gods. And it's, in some ways that's the best instruction that they're going to get. So anything that I can do, to support the athletic department along with our coaches in consultation with our youth sports, I really want to be a part of, because I'm looking forward to hopefully getting my kids involved in the youth basketball here, and any opportunities I can to have my own children who won't go in the district but participate in the great youth sports that are taking place here in Camp Ellisville.
Yeah, I love that. That was a great point. I try to instill in our varsity athletes all that I can, that just the power and influence they have over our youth sports participants, that whatever the parent says, a varsity coach may say to a youth kind of rolls into one year out the other. But if you have one of those varsity athletes there supporting you, teaching you, like they just look up to them like they're a god. So a couple of fun questions they really want to know. Here you are in the podcast for our athletics. So listeners really want to know, Mr. Bacalles, were you involved in sports growing up? Which were they? And any favorite moments that you still talk about years later?
Yeah, growing up, I played, all the youth sports that most kids do: soccer, basketball, baseball. I ended up gravitating towards lacrosse as I got into the middle school age. Corning had a pretty strong program, so I joined one of our travel teams and ended up playing that in high school. I got into football late, didn't play it until my freshman year in high school, but I really liked playing football when I was in high school. And when I look at favorite sports moments, I will say that the friendships that I made with the guys that I played football and lacrosse with in high school, they lasted my entire lifetime. In fact, we're all getting together, about 7 of us, for a weekend down in Pittsburgh. Just in a couple weeks, we get together once a year. We really just developed really close friendships. And even for the guys that go on to participate at the college level, there's a different level of intimacy with the high school athlete, because these are the kids that you grew up with. These are the kids you played sports with, in some cases for 12, 13 years. And there's just a little bit more of a connection there than you would get even with the guys that you played really competitive athletics with at the college level. So, I look at mostly the relationships I developed as a young student athlete and the friendships I developed, and it really pushed me to get my kids into athletics, not necessarily to compete at the highest levels, but to just be around great individuals, learn about competition, and most importantly, being a part of something bigger than yourself, which I think is one of the advantages of being on a team sport. Really helps you. You're just one cog in the machine, and your role may not seem very important to you, but what you do for your teammates in practice, as well as in competitions and whatever, contributing role you have, it's just so integral to the success of the team. And then what I love about team athletics is there's really one stat at the end, and that's the scoreboard, and it's for everyone. As a parent, I've really tried to focus my attention to that team aspect with my kids, where I don't say to them, hey, how did you play during a game? I said, how did the team play? I want to take that pressure off my own individual kids, put it on the team, because at the end of the day, if the team is successful, even if they didn't play well, they were successful.
Yeah, I love how you brought up rules, because the roles of athletes are so important. You might have someone that might not be getting a lot of minutes, not a lot of play time, but what they bring as far as team morale might make the difference between a win and a loss. So everyone's role is just as important as others, not just your starters. I just want to advise you, Mr. Bacalles, be careful. So when you're out there and you're having your weekend with some of your buddies that you play lacrosse with in football, remember they were there. So if you kind of embellish any of those stories, they're probably gonna call you out on it.
You are correct. Those are stories that you gotta tell around to other people that are less informed. You're right, Mr. Loveless.
Yeah, I remember that week 3 game, I had, 7 tackles, 4 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and, I'll remind you quickly if, you embellished any.
Yeah,
No fish stories around the buddies.
They hold you to account.
For sure, for sure. All right, so, Mr. Bacalles, let's say that you could instantly be world class at any sport. Whether it be playing the sport or coaching it, what would you choose? Which sport and why?
When I got into coaching, I actually loved playing lacrosse more than football, but I loved coaching football more than any other sport because I felt as a coach the amount of impact that I could have on a game as a coach using scheme and personnel was just so much more than any other sport that I had the opportunity to coach. So there was nothing I took more pleasure in than just, scouting an opponent, figuring out their tendencies, developing a really good game plan, and then executing it, to make another team look really foolish. So I think if I had to be world class at anything, I loved the challenge of being a football coach. I was an offensive coordinator, so probably the most stress I ever had was just play calling during a game, managing the clock, managing the kids. It really was a challenge that took years to get even mediocre at. But I just I think if I could be world class at anything, it'd be coaching football, just because there was nothing better for me than that feeling of really being successful at the end of after a game, knowing you put in a full week of work, developing just that. Because in other sports, you got multiple contests during the week, so it's one game rolls into the next. But for football, for an entire week, you're staring at one other opponent, you're prepping for them, and then you're hoping to execute a really solid performance against them, on Friday or Saturday.
That's true. I guess I didn't really think about it that close. Not having football here at Campbell, it's been a while. That a lot of our sports, they're playing 3-4 times a week. You get spring season with right now it's baseball, softball. They're playing basically every day, so there's not that time to adjust to your next opponent or work on growing your weaknesses as a team and individuals. For football, you have that week to chew on it and get that new game plan in place.
Yeah, and the coaching is so important in football because we used to always say in most sports, lacrosse, basketball, even baseball, you can just roll out the equipment, the kids take the field, they know how to play the game. Like a football team is completely helpless without the immediate direction of their coach to get them into a formation, to get them to run a play. All defenses are different, all offenses are different. So there's just so much individual attention that you have to give to those kids. Even if they played for years, they're pretty much clueless without your direction. And I really liked that as a coach, just to be able to put my stamp on what was taking place.
All right, Mr. Bacalles, before we go into our last question, I'm just curious because you said you were offensive coordinator for football. Do you remember, did you have any creative names for any of your plays?
It's funny. The goal was, make things as simple as humanly possible. So like a lot of our offensive systems, we were a triple option offense, which I really liked when we were Corning East, and then we went to the double wing when we combined with West High, and the plays basically told you, the gap, the line pull, as well as the person getting the ball. So like when we would run 66 super power, basically the first number told the fullback go to the 6 hole, 6 was the point of attack, and then superpower was the offensive line blocking scheme where 2 guards, the guard and the tackle pull, and then we're walling off on the right. So it really was almost just like a mathematical formula, which I liked. But when it came down to trick plays, that's where we got to be really original. So, I had an assistant coach that used to love this. He called it Bigfoot. So when we ran Bigfoot, we basically had a shotgun snap to our fastest student, and then we put the entire offensive formation on one side to overload it, and it was a direct snap to that kid, and it was just a sweep, to the right or to the left, and the kids really loved running Bigfoot. I remember, depending on the personnel, it worked sometimes. I remember one time we were running in Elmira. Coach wanted to run in, and we had a kid that was just a little jittery. I was like, we're gonna get a false start here. He's not gonna let the line get set, and he's like, no, it's gonna be fine. And sure as not, false start. We ended up scoring on it. Yeah, but
Oh, it's even worse, you scored on it too, huh?
oh yeah, it came back. Things never work out the way you want,
All right, sorry, listeners, it is football season, so I had to ask that question. All right, so Mr. Bacalles, last question. What is one message you would like to send to your students, especially your student athletes? as you start this new chapter here at Camp Elsavona?
Yeah, I just want to say how excited I am to be here and to watch all of you compete, in the fall, winter, and spring seasons as we work our way through the year here. And, for the seniors going out there, I just want to remind you guys, hey, this is it. I used to always feel as a coach, the hardest bus ride we would have at the end of a season was that game at the end of the season where, unless you want to say championship, you're going home on a loss, which happens almost every time. And, we would take that bus ride. It was always tough with those seniors, especially in the spring, because that was it. And it was just, I loved to work the bus, connecting with the kids, telling great stories about all the years I had the opportunity to coach them in football and lacrosse. So just remind student athletes, that are seniors, hey, this is it. You really want to make memorable moments with these kids you've been playing sports with your entire life. So go get after it, do as good as you can, and create those powerful moments and memories that hopefully will last a lifetime. And for our younger athletes working their way up through, recognize the fact that you're in it for the long haul, and the role you play this year is going to be different than the role you might play in the future. So you want to look for opportunities to be successful wherever you can, and then help the team in any manner you can. And I used to always tell athletes, it's hard when you're a role player and you're not necessarily getting out there and getting the minutes, getting that recognition from the public on how well you're playing. But I used to always tell kids, the opinions you should only care about are the fellow student athletes on the team who know if you're a kid that brings his competitive game to practice every day to make other people better, man, that matters so much. So don't put a lot of pressure on what the outside world thinks about you. You want your reputation with your fellow athletes to be robust as not only a good competitor, but most importantly, a good teammate. You want to be a good teammate, someone that's supportive and helps the team out in any way humanly possible, because those are the skills that are going to make you successful at anything you do moving forward, because there is not an occupation out there that doesn't require you to be a good teammate. So I think interscholastic athletics is going to really provide a lot of our student athletes with the opportunity to develop those skills so they become, exceptional coworkers someday, spouses, as they work in that team dynamic, being part of something bigger than themselves.
Well said, Mr. Bacalles, well said. Dare I say, the best podcast of the season. Really appreciate you
Going
being
first
here.
helps, Mr. Loveless.
Oh.
Going first helps.
Oh, we have to put that in there. Maybe we get that part edited out. Thank you to our listeners. We look forward to seeing Mr. Bacalles in our hallways. It's kind of quiet in the building now, but it'll be bustling soon. A reminder to our listeners that official fall sports practice starts August 18th. So we'll be seeing you here soon. And next podcast, we'll have Mr. Carson Daly on. Will be the new head honcho for athletic department. I'll be in a supporting role with him this year. We look forward to seeing you soon. And signing off. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Mr. Loveless.
Tune in to our next episode of the Panthers Den. Until then, go Panthers!